Welcome back to Storytime. In today's episode, we're going to be continuing our reading of Machines and Men, but before we jump into it, just a quick reminder. If you like this content, you can follow us on Reddit at r/Creant World, where you can become a Creant and where you can submit writing and art for consideration. You can also hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this once a week, and we will be happy to have you as part of the Creant World community. And now, Machines and Men, Chapter 11, The Human Brain at Work. Stephen and Vera walked over to Andy's apartment later in the week. Stephen had a pouch containing his multiple-sided dice strapped to his belt and a 12-pack of vanilla Coke under an arm. Andy had been looking to get a group together for Dungeons & Dragons for quite some time, and this was going to be their first session. Stephen had carefully explained all the rules and mechanics to Vera, who had listened attentively, but this was going to be a real test of her positronic matrix. Storytelling, role-playing, thinking creatively, these were not things people had tried with robots before, so far as Stephen knew. The closest thing to this that had ever been with a robot was a special robot that was said to have been able to compose music. The robot in question was really nothing more than a powerful positronic computer attached to a piano-playing mechanism. The scientists that had made it had spent months feeding the computer data about music, about styles and genres, and their work had paid off, at least in part. The robot could flawlessly play any song the scientists asked it to, shifting from one song to another without pause or hesitation. It could play songs by one artist in the style of another. It could combine genres, move things around, and even reconfigure the songs in such a way that they were nearly indistinguishable from the original. But when the scientists had asked the robot to produce its own music, had given it complete creative freedom, the music that the robot had produced was really nothing more than a random collection of sounds. Time and again, the robot would compose a song that was a random amalgamation of notes, arrayed so sporadically that the sheet music it produced looked like a musical Rorschach test. As to playing what was written, the machine could do it, but certainly no human could. The piano-playing robot, who the scientists had named Chopin, had gone on world tour, and people had marveled at the complexity of the songs, but secretly, most everyone that heard the music thought it was pretty awful. Positronic brains had come quite a ways from Chopin's day. Still, creativity was definitely something that robots had to work on. Stephen had stressed to Vera that if she found playing too hard, that she could just bow out. He didn't want her taxing her positronic net, but he was still interested to see what the robot could come up with. Vera, for her part, had seemed very confident that she would have no trouble playing the game whatsoever. The rules, she had assured Stephen, were fairly simple to understand, and she had no doubt that she could handle it. He hadn't argued. But Stephen knew from first-hand experience that there was a big difference between knowing how to play a game and being good at it, and role-playing games tended to derail with absurd ease. Entering the parking lot of Andy's building, Stephen caught sight of Meg leaning against the door of a car. She waved, and he returned the gesture and led Vera over to meet her. Meg had a backpack, likely containing all the published literature for D&D, the Player's Guide, the Monster Manual, the Dungeon's Guide, and so on, inside. She was wearing her usual baggy sweater and ankle-length skirt combo, but had braided her hair into a long braid. Stephen had never realized how long Meg's hair was. The braid came down almost to the small of her back. "Did you find the place okay?" Stephen asked as he came up. "Meg, this is Vera. Vera, this is Meg. We're co-workers." "It's great to meet you," Vera said, shaking Meg's hand warmly. "You too," Meg said with a smile. Stephen could tell that Meg was looking Vera over carefully, comparing herself to the robot. At the moment, Vera was dressed in a graphic t-shirt, jeans, and boots that didn't hide her obvious loveliness, but also didn't accentuate it. Stephen could see the wheels going around in Meg's head. He had brought this obviously pretty girl with him, and right now Meg was trying to figure out whether Vera was his girlfriend or not. "And he said there would be 2 other guys he knows coming tonight," Stephen said, more to distract Meg's attention from Vera than anything else. "So I thought it would be good to even out the numbers a bit." Meg broke from her evaluation of Vera and slid Stephen a grin. "It's all good. I came expecting a sausage fest. Generally, when guys find out I'm an RPer, their brains can't handle it." "Well, it's not every day we have girls at D&D games, let alone 2. Stephen said, leading the way upstairs. When they entered the apartment, they could see that Andy, who was DMing, was well versed in the customs of hosting such events. Bags of chips were on the table, along with 2 large pizzas and 2-liter bottles of Mountain Dew and Diet Coke. The usually cluttered coffee table had been cleared, and a map with miniatures had been set out. All was clearly set up and ready for the game. Andy was in the tiny kitchen pouring drinks for 2 guys, both bearded and dressed in black, as they came in, and greeted them warmly, hugging Vera and shaking Meg's hand. He introduced the strangers as John and Jared Watley, 2 brothers that were his downstairs neighbors, and greetings were generally passed around. It was a bit satisfying to Stephen's ego that both brothers clearly and obviously couldn't stop looking at Vera, though he suspected that they were mostly eyeing her breasts, prominent even through the shirt. When everyone had gotten themselves settled with snacks and drinks, they gathered around the table and sat down. Meg seated herself on Stephen's left, and Vera took the seat on his right, the brothers opposite them, and Andy at the head of the table, behind the obligatory DM screen. Everyone set to establishing their characters, and there was much passing of books, pencils, and snacks for a while. Stephen was focused on developing his own character, but didn't notice at first that Vera had done nothing towards starting her character sheet. When he finally did notice, he leaned over and whispered in her ear. "What's wrong?" he asked, looking at Vera nervously for any signs that she might have caught a glitch from thinking too much.
"I don't know what to make," she whispered back confidentially. "There are so many variables to be considered. Should I wait and see what everyone else is making so I can better complete the party?"
"That might not be a bad idea," he responded, nodding. Then louder, "What's everyone thinking of being? This is Vera's first time, and she's not sure what she was going to need to make yet." "I'm going to be a half-orc fighter. It's going to be a mega tank," John said with a grin. "I'm going to call him Creant." "I'm a battle mage," Jared said. "I'm basically making Mario right now."
"I was thinking of rolling up a stealth druid,"
Meg said, without looking up from the player's handbook. "And I'm a warlock," Stephen told Vera. "So we could probably use a healer, like a cleric or something like that."
"Oh, okay,"
Vera said, picking up her pencil. Stephen watched Vera pause for a moment, her pencil poised over her page, and then, much to his relief, she began writing. Vera was the first to finish, even though she had started last, and sat back in her chair waiting for the others. Stephen stole a look at her page, and his eyes widened. Her character sheet was completely maxed out. She had exploited every loophole, added every possible bonus for their level, but one thing that stood out immediately was that she had literally no means of defending herself in combat. She had spec'd her character entirely to be focused on healing and buff spells, and there was no doubt that her character would be the most effective healer he had ever played with, but there was no consideration at all given to attacking. Even her weapons seemed to have more benefits for healing than damaging. As the rest of the group finished selecting their characters, Stephen had to admit he was very proud of Vera so far. Her robotic single-mindedness had helped her make something fully optimized, for one task at least. The real challenge was still to come, though. Finally, when everyone was set, Andy set the stage for them. The game revolved around some strange meteors that had fallen into the world and were raising the dead. The party had been hired to research the meteors and save the world. As they sallied forth from town, it didn't take long for the party to encounter bandits on the road. Immediately, combat launched. 2 things became apparent to Stephen. The first was that Vera was very good at healing, but she clearly reached the end of her positronic imagination. When asked how she was reacting to situations, she would usually respond factually, and usually with only heal or hold action. She didn't seem to be able to elaborate more than that, and it was obvious that imagination was just a bit outside of her grasp. The second thing, which became apparent, was that even though Vera had clearly reached her limits, Meg was only becoming more and more creative. As she warmed up to the group, she began to act out her character's voice, putting on a very convincing Jamaican accent and describing her actions with obvious relish. Meg was an excellent actress, and when she inhabited her character, the hidden butterfly behind the boring chrysalis of her facade. Her eyes lit up as she described the actions of her character. Meg had rolled a beautiful, strong, confident, and even charismatic elven druid, and Stephen couldn't help but notice that Meg's character seemed to be the exact opposite of Meg herself. But as the character came alive, there was a sort of energy in Meg's eyes, and she seemed to gain confidence. As they continued playing, Meg emerged as the clear leader of the group, while Vera moved to the background. Stephen watched in amazement as the evening continued, an almost miraculous transformation in Meg. She began leaning forward in more intensity, her normal timid voice becoming stronger and more confident. The room where they were playing was a sort of confined space, and with 5 people in close quarters, things tend to heat up. Halfway through the campaign, Meg stood and carefully pulled the sweatshirt over her head. Stephen was somewhat taken aback by her appearance. Under her frumpy sweatshirt, Meg was actually very cute. True, her body was a bit doughy, but her breasts had a nice plump shape to them, and her hips were wide and rounded. She was wearing a sky blue spaghetti-strap top, which scooped low enough to show her cleavage, and a wide-strap beige bra. Meg caught Stephen watching her and blushed slightly, self-consciously adjusting one of her bra straps. She sat down again, and her voice sank back to its quiet, timid tone for a while. While the group took a break, John and Jared went out on the balcony to smoke, Vera going along with them with an encouraging look from Stephen. Meg almost immediately disappeared in search of Apollo, who had made an appearance about an hour ago, yawned, rubbed against each of them, claiming them as his own personal property, and then sauntered off for another nap. As soon as Meg was out of sight, Andy gestured to Stephen to come to the kitchen with him. "Dude, where did you find Meg?" Andy asked, getting a beer out of the fridge. "She's really good. Or at least she is when she doesn't catch you and the other guys checking out her tits. I literally never knew she looked like that before. She always wears those super baggy clothes at work. It caught me off guard," Stephen said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Is it my imagination, or does she seem interested in me?" "Oh, dude, she's totally interested in you," Andy said with a grin. "Speaking of, why'd you bring Vera if you're not going to hang out with her? Don't tell me you're getting bored of her already." Stephen laughed and leaned up against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest. "Hardly," he said, shaking his head. "She's incredible. I told you she's been researching sexual techniques, and, well, damn. She's been wearing me out, actually. The dangers of getting with someone who never tires. Still, that's why I partly wanted to bring her tonight. If she has other tasks to focus on, maybe she'll slow down a bit. She seems like she's doing pretty well, all things considered." "Yeah, she's doing a good job. Though to be fair, she's currently a literal heel-bot." The game resumed, and Stephen kept finding himself distracted. The little voice at the back of his head was back with a vengeance, and wasn't about to quiet down this time. As he watched Vera playing, he couldn't suppress the feeling that she was really just going through the motions. A robot couldn't really think creatively. She was just performing a basic task without emotion or any deeper thought. And that right there was the problem with robots. The thing that made them inhuman. The thing which so many people found mildly unsettling about them. They had no real emotions. Everything they did or said was a result of their programming. Vera had been programmed to like him, to be happy to serve him, and even, Stephen hated to admit it to himself, she had been programmed to act like she loved him. Despite all the kisses and cuddling, despite all the laughing and sex, Vera wasn't really in love with him, couldn't be in love with him. It was all just a paper moon looking over a cardboard sea. None of it was real, nor would it ever be. He loved her, he had no doubts on that score, but she, for all of her kindness and cheerful compliance, could never love him back. Now Stephen understood the debate of robots as pets. A dog or a cat could love you back, could pine for you, miss you, be truly happy when it was with you, but a robot never could. Vera had told Stephen that she didn't like to be apart from him, and she seemed genuinely despondent when he left her, but if he was going to be honest, if he hadn't set Vera tasks to research, she would have in all likelihood simply sat in the house and waited for him to come back again. Humans may be flawed creatures, and women were especially an enigma, but at least they were still human when all was said and done. They could feel, they could create, they could grow and change. A robot was none of those things, and never could be. If Vera was damaged, she couldn't repair herself. She could never give more than 100%. She always did her very best on everything she did. Stephen had no illusions about that. But she could never push herself to even greater heights, could never work beyond her limits. Not only that, but so far, from what he had seen, Vera was simply mimicking the way other people moved, acted, and behaved. She couldn't do anything for herself. In short, she could only ever be someone else. There was no personality. There was nothing that was essentially Vera that she could claim for herself. It hurt his heart to think about it because he really did love her. He loved her walk, he loved her voice, he loved her smile. She was wonderful, everything he had ever wanted and more, but she was not human. She was infallible. She would never make a mistake, never have any annoying habits, never be an individual. He wished, not for the last time, that he could make Vera a real girl. He would give anything for that. If she could be transformed into a human, there would be nothing he wouldn't do to make it happen. It was then that he realized his mistake. He had felt like Pygmalion building his Galatea, and he had thought the Blue Fairy had been his Aphrodite to bring her to life. But the reality was that while he might be Pygmalion, his Galatea would never be alive. When the game was over, the group disbanded and everyone headed to their cars.
That was a lot of fun,
Meg said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, not really meeting Stephen's eye. Then turning to Vera, she smiled politely and said,
It was really good to meet you, Vera. I hope to see you next week. It was really nice to meet you too, Meg. Drive careful on your way home,
Vera said, completely oblivious to the note of subtle sarcasm in Meg's voice. Stephen and Vera waved as Meg drove away and then headed home. Climbing into bed, Stephen cuddled up with Vera and closed his eyes. For some reason he couldn't explain. He almost wished that it was Meg that was here in bed with him. He fell asleep berating himself about this. How could he possibly not be happy with perfection? He was not a cheater. He could never hurt Vera like that, like he had been hurt. He had made a commitment to Vera, and he was not going to break it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that episode, hit that like button, and if you really liked it, feel free to subscribe for more videos like this every week. But until next time, I'll see you later.